All right, Chris, welcome to the show, buddy. I know you've been hanging out with Zach for quite some time in Clubhouse. So A, welcome, and B, I'm going to let you guys cue it up and we'll have a cool conversation here.
Cool. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought it'd be powerful to bring you on, Chris, because you're in the creative financing space, just like we are. And as we were talking about this offline before we jumped on, I think it's always nice for people to hear other people doing creative financing deals. So it's not just us, and a different perspective, because I mean, there's so many different ways that you can approach these different types of deals. So I think to kind of start this off, Chris, why don't you kind of bring us behind the green curtain per se? Like I know you from Clubhouse, but maybe tell us about what you did before you get into real estate, and then we'll kind of go through your journey there.
Sure. And thanks again, Zach and Chris. So yes, I've been an entrepreneur for a little while. I kind of stumbled into real estate wholesaling. But before that, I was doing furniture sales, collectibles. So I actually still have a store here in St. Louis. And I'm an auctioneer. So 25 and out, 35 and out, 45 and out sold. So I do all that, and I help people liquidate and sell their merchandise, so we either buy out the contents of a house. And many times it kind of works together where we actually get leads. So people might call and say, hey, we got a house full of stuff we're trying to get rid of. So my next question is, what are you doing with the house? So we get some leads that way as well. So a lot of the things that I do, that I was doing prior to real estate, kind of go together with what I'm doing now.
Well, now we learned a new talent. We're gonna have you do that on the rooms now too.
That's a given.
Fantastic. We're gonna have to get that rolling. So Chris, you got into what made you get into wholesaling first before we talk about your transition?
Yeah, so basically I was just studying some YouTube videos and stuff, and how they just put up suggested videos, and I fell asleep listening to some motivational speaking or something, I don't know. And when I woke up, I saw a guy on a video with a big beard named Max Maxwell talking about real estate. So what is he talking about? You can do real estate, like what? So I started digging and finding out more about wholesaling. I started marketing immediately and just jumped in the game. I mean, I wouldn't suggest anybody just do that, but I just did it. I took action and asked questions later, stumbled upon my first couple of deals, did 17 deals in my first year, and finally got into creative.
Love it. We're not wearing our Life Rewards action shirts. I think you'd like that one better than the Got Grit one today. But clearly, life does reward action for you, because you dive into motivationals, you then wake up with wholesaling, and then all of a sudden you do 17 deals in the first year. What was it like maybe just entering it? Because we have a lot of people that are watching this podcast or listening to this podcast and saying, I want to get involved in real estate, but I don't necessarily know how to. So maybe you could take us back to where your mindset was when you went to do your first deal, or how you really made that first leap.
Yeah, so the crazy part about it, my first couple of deals was virtual. I never met the homeowner, so it was all over the phone. So, coming in, a lot of people are afraid to get on the phone and talk to people, probably really more afraid to go to the house and talk to people. So it was kind of easier for me to say, well, I'm on the phone. What are they going to do? Jump through and yell at me? What are they going to do? Hang up? So, I learned some, ways to talk to people. I did some bandit signs, those little signs on the side of the road that say, we buy houses and stuff like that. So I put out a bunch of those, and people started calling, and before you know it, I was able to stumble upon my first deal. First wholesale deal was $1,800. So it was proof of concept. It showed me that it was real, that you can actually do it. Now, throughout the journey of learning other strategies as far as marketing and things like that and generating leads, started finding out that most people cannot do a wholesale deal. I mean, every house is not going to sell their house for 2 cents on the dollar. It's just not happening. It's not real. So I had to learn some other strategies, and that's how I kind of stumbled into creative finance. I had people that were looking to sell, but it didn't meet that Mayo formula, giving them a 30% discount minus repairs and things. So I wasn't able to do those. So I said, well, I got to learn some other strategies, because these people still want to sell their house and they're willing to do it. And I just had to get into the game.
Chris, I had a question for you. So in hindsight, now that you're in the creative world, because all the time people think perceptually that they have to go wholesale first. In hindsight, would you have necessarily gone wholesale first and then stumbled upon, or do you wish you knew creative at the time? And then compare the check sizes, if you would, as you answer that.
Yeah, I would say it's depending on the training of the person. If somebody's taking some good training like you all distribute all the time, something like that, I say do it both. But if you're just kind of winging it, I mean, I guess you could do either. because it's a different world. It's a different mindset. But the biggest thing that I find when dealing with people coming into real estate is that they are trying to think for others. Oh, I wouldn't do that. Or, I wouldn't do that if I were you, that type of mentality. When they shouldn't be thinking for others. They should be asking questions, listening for the problems, and actually doing that thing to solve that problem versus I wouldn't sell my house for that cheap, or I wouldn't take payments for my house, or I wouldn't sell my house in that creative way that I never heard of. That's the biggest thing that I see people kind of hurting themselves with.
I love if you're watching this on YouTube, Chris has upgraded from the bandit signs to visors now that say I buy houses.
I bought a house from it too. I bought a house. I got one deal from a hat, so it was worth
a hat.
All right, you got to tell. All right, we got to hear about this. All right, so lay the groundwork here. So you're wearing your visor, and then how do you buy this house?
So basically, I was talking to somebody, and they saw me with a hat on. They were like, "Oh wow, you buy houses?" My dad's trying to sell their house, so they told me about it, and I ended up structuring a deal with them, and ended up buying their house. I mean, it's just started with the conversation. It starts the conversation. Now, once you get into the conversation, it's a lot of other moving parts in between that, but at least people got to know you exist, that you want to do a deal with them. So that's the reason, I do things like that.
I love it. I love it. It's like we're at Clubhouse live at the event, and the guy had a t-shirt that said, like, I'm looking for property managers. Like, that's all his shirt said. So I was like, I started wearing shirts to say, I'm looking for serious real estate investors that want to change their lives. So Chris, you did an $1,800 wholesale deal that got you in the business, that got you moving and built your confidence. You transitioned to creative financing. Tell us about maybe the transition. Like, what was your first deal like? What type of deal was it? What did that check look like?
Yeah, for sure. So, so my very first wholesale deal was $1,800. I closed that August 31st of 2018. My very first deal. So, I've only been in this game about 3 years. So I'm still a baby, really, to most people. So I closed that deal in August, and December is when I closed my very first creative deal. That deal was a subject to. So we sent out a ringless voicemail campaign to a list that we skip traced that was absentee owner. So it was just an absentee owner, nothing special about it, just basically throwing something at the wall and see what'll stick. So a lady texts back and said, yeah, I would love to sell my house, but I don't think you can help me because of how much I owe. I said, well, what's a good time to talk? We can see what we can do. So I talked to her at lunchtime on her lunch break, got some other basic information like how much she owed, how much per month, the situation, found out that the house was vacant. It was in a good area in South St. Louis County. I still owe that house today. So I ended up structuring a deal with her, doing a subject to deal. So basically her family members were living in a property, and they ended up moving out and basically abandoning the house. So she's like, I don't want the house. I can't afford it. I don't live there. I don't want to deal with this. She had a for sale by owner sign in her yard, but here's the kicker. It was a quiet street, so there's really no traffic going on in the street, so nobody saw the for sale by owner sign. So she's been trying to sell the house for about 2 months before we stumbled upon her on a ringless voicemail campaign. She owed about $115,000 on the property. The payments were about $800 a month on it, and she was about 3 months behind. So basically, I structured a deal where I was able to catch up her loan, pay the closing costs, so I came out of pocket about $3,500 to take the deal down because I had some wholesale money stacked up. So it wasn't like painful to say, oh, $3,500 to buy this house. Didn't know what I was doing, but I pushed it through anyway. So I bought the house, caught up her loan, came out of pocket about $3,500. About a week later, I found a tenant buyer. So we put somebody in on what we call that lease option. Everybody loves lease options, right? Put somebody in on a lease option. They dropped $21,419 on their initial payment, on their initial amount. So that was the biggest check I had got to that date. So on that first deal, so that took away my $3,500 that I put into it. So I basically ended up getting a free house. They pay $1,000 a month. Now that payment is actually lower because when I switched the insurance, not to get too far in the inner workings of this stuff, but when I switched the insurance from the owner-occupied policy to a non-owner occupied policy, landlord policy, that reduced the insurance rate. So the payment now is like $700. So it's cash flowing about $300 a month for the last 3 years, and I have no money in the deal. But here's another kicker. I don't want to hit them with too much stuff at once, Zach, but I got to hit them.
Too many kickers. Come on. This is the kicker on the kicker. Go ahead.
So now that house is, the loan is probably about $80,000 or something like that. and the house worth about 185,000. So we got $100,000 in equity on a house I have no money in. And that's just the first house I bought. So that just shows some of the power in this creative real estate stuff. So I love it.
Chris, can you believe it or not, there's probably we're in 96 plus countries here. So there's probably some people that go, what are they talking about with sub two? Just quick definition of sub two, and then who you see more prone to do sub two, because you just described kind of the avatar of sub two for sure. And then I got a question about the size of that check, but why don't we start with the definition?
Sure. So yeah, subject to, you're basically going to buy the house subject to the existing financing, leaving the financing in the seller's name or the borrower's name or the homeowner's name, leaving that loan in place. And we're going to transfer the deed, which is ownership, over to us or our entity. So it's just basically a way to buy the property, leaving the debt in place, transferring the ownership to us.
And because we deal, the reason I said who's more prone, and you kind of described the avatar, because we deal with sellers who are free and clear and then not stressed out, and we do owner financing perhaps, and then we deal with people like Chris just described. That is a perfect fix because we're fixing real estate problems. That's a perfect fix for in an avenue for sub two. So that's why I love it. Okay, so my only other thought on this deal, and then I'm sure Zach has a thought, is the check was
I didn't
20.
answer your second question. I'm sorry, I skipped your second.
That's all right. We just
who's the avatar, who's the person. So yes, for sale by owners, great source there, because they already raised their hand and say, yes, I want to sell. And think about it. Most people, when they want to sell, what do they want to do? List it with a real estate agent. Why didn't you list with a real estate agent? So that gives us an open conversation. So that's one type of person. Another, I like those that are expired listings, meaning they've already tried to go through the gauntlet of going through open houses and all the things of selling the house, the stresses of it, and it didn't work for whatever reason. Now they're more open to listen to something more creative, so we can work a deal with them that way.
Okay, you love that New England mentality, Chris. You asked two questions, he answered you, and you're on to the next thing. New England mentality. I love it.
We'll bounce. One more thing about the check size, Chris. You have 3 paydays, which we love, right? 3 paydays is better than 1. It's kind of the new way of real estate, Zach and I call it. I want to scream that for all the listeners to know, because a lot of wholesalers, and we have great friends that are wholesale, so I'm not poo-pooing wholesaling, but $1,800, $5,000, $10,000, not as good as $21,000 plus a monthly spread plus a cash out, and you get some serious equity there. So I just want to put a big explanation on that, and yeah, congrats on that deal.
Most definitely. So yeah, that's it's a game changer. And like I said, that was just the first one. You know, it's a lot of others after that, but that first one just shows you that, wow, look at the opportunity here. And the house didn't need any repairs. We're not talking about beat up raggedy houses either. This is a beautiful 4-bedroom house in South St. Louis County. So a lot of people have the mindset that the house has to be trash or has to be some crazy stuff. It just has to be a person that wants to do business with you.
Love it. So there's many people that are interested in getting involved in this space. So and I know that you coach and you mentor some people as well. What's maybe the number one or top 2 or 3 things that are stopping people from getting involved in this creative financing space? Because I mean, proof of concept is there. I mean, if people listen to this podcast or they spend time with you, proof of concept's there. So what's stopping them?
Yeah, kind of like what I said earlier. A lot of people figure that a person won't do it, and they are afraid to even ask or even afraid to have the conversation. Are you open to something more creative when you sell your house? Anything. They don't want to start it because there's a lot of moving parts and it's some training involved, but you can learn it. I mean, would it take a week or 2 to really, kind of understand it? I learned it as I was doing my first deal. I didn't know all the moving parts and all of that stuff, and when you understand how to structure these deals and get the proper training like you all present, it's a game changer. So that's what I think the biggest stopping point is, taking the time to educate themselves. In fact, I want to make a bold claim. I've made this claim before, but I don't want to scare anybody. I tell them, drop out of school and go learn real estate. That's how powerful it is. Just drop out whatever you're studying right now and go learn this creative real estate stuff, because it is a game changer.
That was the route my son Nick took, Chris. So I actually agree with you. So good bomb. Zach, how many people drove by our office building, which I'm standing in now, on a main drag here in our town, saw a for sale by owner sign and assumed that the owner wouldn't owner finance? Probably everyone, because we're in a busy market. And we did it owner financing, free and clear, 20 years. So Chris, your answer is perfect there, spot on. People prejudge.
Yeah, that prejudging is really just, there's no reason. You got to get yourself out of the way. And I do this every time I talk to any homeowner for any reason. I know nothing, even if I know some stuff. I know nothing, but I do know to ask good quality questions. Figure out what's going on with them. Because if you go in with, oh yeah, this thought process that, oh, I don't think they're going to do it. You're right. What's the saying? if you think you can or you think you can't, either way, you're right. And that's how people go into this business with the wrong mindset.
Yeah, I want to make sure we cover this because you said, all right, you started wholesaling on the phone, bought virtually. And then, of course, this is how the business has been built, has been with cold calling and making calls. So what do you think is stopping people? What do you think their biggest challenges with the phone? I mean, I would say that when we're teaching students, that's like the first thing we got to get them over is fear of the phone. So is there any techniques or anything that you're doing with your students or people that you're working with to make it so they're better on the phone, they eliminate that fear?
Yeah, so basically training them up on how to ask good open-ended questions. Like, are you aware of any repairs that may be needed on the house? Are you aware? I mean, it's just open. I mean, they may be, they may not be, who knows? Tell me a little bit about your property. It's an opening question. That could go to anybody. Hey, you want to sell? Great. Is this a good time to talk? Tell me a little bit about your house. And just shut up, and listen. That little thing, little stuff like that can make a difference. There's a bunch of other stuff we can talk about. In fact, I even teach you should be asking at least 50 questions. If you haven't asked at least 50 questions, you probably haven't asked enough. Now, I'm not saying it has to be like drilling, like, going down a script or anything, but you need to know what's going on with that situation wholeheartedly so you can understand how you can actually solve that problem.
You heard the man, at least 50 questions. We always go based upon the rule 90, 90, 10 or 80, 20, which is you're speaking 10 to 20% of the time and the seller speaking 80 to 90% of the time, because it's all about determining their motivation and then creating a solution surrounding that. I love where your head's at there. Chris, as we're coming to wrap up, is there any final questions? Chris is there any final questions that you had in your mind before we release this lion back out in the wild?
Yeah, I do regarding that actually. So for those of you wicked smart listeners on audio only, you're going to want to jump over to YouTube to appreciate this question. But Chris, really tricky question here. You got a lion on your body and you got a lion behind you. So there's got to be significance of lion. You want to explain that?
It's not. You just happen to catch me with a lion on that's been on the wall, but you just happen to catch me with that on there. So there is no thing. I'm a lucky Libra. Birthday just passed October 17th. So I'm not a Leo or anything like that.
Well, happy birthday.
Thank you.
You never know when you ask about someone's picture behind them. I've gotten the weirdest stories. So that's why I asked.
Well, you got to have the heart of a lion to come out here and go to this game and take down this marketplace, And another thing too, I did want to say for the listeners, when you actually understand some of this creative strategies, you can dominate your market because a lot of people don't take the time to learn it. It might be a handful of people in any market that even understand half of this stuff. They might have heard about it. Oh, well, I don't know. That stuff's kind of tricky. And they just give up. Great, give up, bring those leads to me, and I'll show how to do it. In fact, many of the best deals we've done has came from wholesalers, has came from real estate agents, has came from others in the business that didn't know what to do. Bring it to me. Be a resource in your market to help people do their real estate deals.
I love it. We present in our master's class, which anybody that has not watched our master's class, if you just go to smartrealestatecoach.com/master's class, we show you an example in which a realtor referred the deal that made us $80,000+. And I always say this to anybody we're presenting to or having a conversation with. Hey, if you're a realtor, I want you to see this example because I want you to see how much money you're leaving on the table if you don't have these tools in your tool belt in order to make this thing happen. So that's a great point. So Chris Monroe, as we wrap this thing up, I know when I'm interviewed on podcasts, when Chris is interviewed on podcasts, we always say oh, I wish they just asked me this. Is there anything that you were hoping that we were going to ask you or you wanted to say to the audience before we chat up?
I don't even think about it, to be honest, Zach. I usually do a lot of live streams. I just push record or start and bam, whatever come out, it come out raw. If I slip up, if I stutter or whatever I'm going to do that. So that's just part of me, and I just train myself to be that way because, whatever's going to happen, it helps me become a better pivoter. I want to pivot when something comes at me, some, objection or whatever that some seller might bring, whatever. We don't know what life's going to get. And so I take this time to practice, and that's why practice makes perfect.